It was the day before the big SAT exam and Jimmy was feeling pretty confident. Who needs to study math? He scoffed to his parents over dinner.
I've got my trusty calculator to get me through any tricky questions.
Jimmy's parents exchanged a worried glance. I don't think a calculator alone is enough preparation for the math section, sweetie, his mom said gently. Maybe you should review some of the key concepts and do a few practice problems. PSH, waste of time, Jimmy said through a mouthful of mashed potatoes. I'll just plug and chug through the test.
What could go wrong?
What Jimmy lacked in preparedness he made up for in confidence.
He had always skated by in math classes by copying off the smart kids and relying on his calculator to solve equations. Junior year he even convinced his math teacher Mrs. Pembroke that he had test anxiety to get out of the midterm.
So Jimmy saw no reason why the SAT would be any different.
The night before the fateful exam, Jimmy lounged in front of the TV watching game shows and playing on his phone instead of cracking open a textbook.
See ya. He called to his parents breezily on his way out the door in the morning.
I'll be back in time for waffles when I ace this test. Jimmy sailed through the first few sections feeling smug and self-assured. Then he hit the math questions.
As he blinked at the strings of variables and graphs, panic started to set in. He fumbled for his calculator with shaky hands and desperately tried punching numbers.
But no matter what he typed in, the calculator just spat out error messages. Jimmy broke out in a sweat as he moved on to the next problem.
He looked around and saw the other kids' pencils scratching away as they solved equations. Gulping, Jimmy skipped ahead to try and find some questions he could actually answer.
But everyone seemed to have weird shapes and charts instead of nice, simple numbers he could plug into his calculator. Time ticked down relentlessly.
Jimmy started randomly filling in bubbles, hoping luck would give him at least a few points. By the time the proctor called "pencils down," Jimmy was on the verge of tears.
There was no way he had passed.
What was he going to tell his parents?
And how would he get into college now? Numb with shock, Jimmy trudged home.
He stood outside his front door working up the courage to confess. Maybe his parents would understand. Maybe they could hire him a tutor and he could retake the test.
As Jimmy reached for the doorknob, the door suddenly swung open. There stood his parents, their faces flushed with anger.
I just got an email saying you never even took the SAT.
His dad shouted. Where were you all morning?
Jimmy's mouth flapped wordlessly.
Busted. In his panic, he had forgotten the elaborate fake test ruse he had constructed so he could sneak off to play mini golf with his friends instead. That's it, you're grounded for life. His mom yelled, as Jimmy backed away from the door. Say goodbye to your phone, your games, everything. We're packing you off to SAT prep camp in Alaska.
The blood drained from Jimmy's face.
Alaska?
No way. As his parents advanced, Jimmy did the only thing he could. He turned and ran. Soon Jimmy was sprinting down unfamiliar streets, his parents' angry shouts ringing in his ears. He had to get away, but to where?
As night fell, Jimmy found himself alone, tired, and still in his t-shirt and shorts from that morning. With no money for food or transport, his situation was looking dire. Exhausted, Jimmy curled up to sleep on the steps of the public library.
At least things can't get worse, he muttered. Then it started to rain. Hard. Within minutes, Jimmy was drenched and shivering. He spotted a dumpster down the alley and rushed over, hoping to find some scrap of cloth to shield himself. Rummaging desperately through the garbage, his fingers closed on something soft. Jimmy pulled out a clear plastic bag. It was dotted with stains of mysterious origin, but at least it was waterproof. Jimmy poked holes for his head and arms and pulled it on as a makeshift poncho. Slightly less soaked but now smelling like old lunch meat, Jimmy wandered the dark streets searching for shelter. He turned a corner and spotted a bowling alley that was still open. The neon lights and warm glow from inside beckoned invitingly. Jimmy rushed forward in relief,
only to be stopped short at the entrance by a burly bouncer.
"Can't let you in here, kid," the bouncer grunted, wrinkling his nose at Jimmy's garbage bag attire. "Beat it."
Dejected, Jimmy turned to go. But after only a few steps, his foot bumped something large sticking out of a bag of trash.
Jimmy reached down and extracted a pair of slick black rental bowling shoes, size 10.
They were a little big on Jimmy's feet, but still better than the flip-flops he currently had on.
Jimmy laced them up and continued on his way. As the first light of dawn peeked over the horizon, Jimmy wandered past a newspaper box. On the front page he spotted a picture of himself under the headline, "Teen runs away before SAT."
Heart sinking even further, Jimmy realized his parents must have reported him missing.
There was no going back now even if he wanted to.
Ducking his head in shame, Jimmy shuffled along wearing his plastic poncho and oversized bowling shoes.
His future looked bleaker than ever thanks to one fateful decision to blow off studying for the SAT.
He was well and truly up the creek without a calculator.